The dim haze of cigarette smoke hung heavy in the air of the rusty chain saloon, a weathered outpost on the edge of the Nevada desert, where the roar of Harleys outside faded into the low rumble of conversations inside. It was a place for forgotten men. Tattooed arms slung over scarred wooden counters, leather vests patched with club insignias, and eyes hardened by roads that led nowhere good. The jukebox in the corner spat out a gritty blues track, its notes battling the clink of beer bottles and the occasional bark of laughter. But tonight, something sliced through the din like a cold wind off the dunes. A soft, trembling hum from the far booth. A scrawny boy, no more than 8, sat alone on the cracked vinyl seat, his oversized flannel shirt swallowing his frame like a hand-me-down from a ghost. Oliver, they called him, though no one knew his last name or how he'd wandered into this den of grease and grit. His knees bounced under the table, dirt-streaked sneakers tapping a nervous rhythm, and his small hands clutched a crumpled napkin as if it were a lifeline. The other patrons barely glanced his way. Kids like him washed up here sometimes, strays from broken homes or worse, drawn by the neon glow promising warmth that never came. But when that first note escaped his lips, faint and wavering, the room didn't still. It fractured. The hum was a lullaby, ancient and tender, weaving through the smoke like threads of forgotten silk. Hush now, little wanderer, the stars will guide you home. Jack Morrison froze mid-sip at the bar, his calloused fingers tightening around the whiskey glass until the cheap tumbler cracked against his palm. At 49, Jack was the iron spine of the Iron Promise MC, the man who stared down rival crews without flinching, who rode through dust storms with a snarl that could curdle rain. His face was a map of old wars, a jagged scar from a knife fight in '98 tracing his jaw, grey threading his black beard like veins in weathered steel. He'd built his life on promises kept in blood, loyalty to his brothers, vengeance for the fallen. But since Sarah's death 3 years back, those oaths felt like chains dragging him into the sand. Cancer had taken her slow, a thief in the night, leaving him with nothing but echoes and the club's unyielding code. The boy's voice grew a touch bolder, the melody unfolding like a secret uncoiling in the dim light. Jack's breath hitched, the whiskey burning forgotten on his tongue. That tune, it was hers. Sarah's lullaby, the one she'd hummed in the quiet hours after their fights, or when the desert winds howled too loud outside their trailer. She'd scribbled it down in her final months, a fragile composition born from pain, meant for no one but him. For the lost ones, she'd whispered once, her hand frail in his, eyes already drifting toward some distant horizon. Jack had buried those pages with her, a private vow to let her light fade without the world's grubby touch. Yet here it was, spilling from this kid's throat, pure as morning dew on rusted chrome. He slid off the stool, boots thudding heavy on the peanut shell-strewn floor, the room's haze parting as he crossed it like a shadow detaching from the wall. Conversations dipped, eyes flicking toward him. The toughest bastard in the bar, moving not with his usual swagger, but with a predator's stillness. Oliver looked up, his humming faltering. Wide brown eyes, reflecting the neon flicker of a Budweiser sign. The boy shrank back, but Jack stopped short, towering yet somehow diminished, his broad shoulders slumping under an invisible weight. "Where'd you learn that song, kid?" His voice was gravel, low and edged, but laced with something raw, like an engine sputtering on its last fumes. Oliver swallowed, glancing at the door as if weighing flight. The saloon's air thickened, the jukebox track ending in a scratchy whine, leaving only the hum of the fridge and the distant call of a coyote. "A lady." "At the shelter," he mumbled, voice barely above the creak of the booth. "She sang it to me when I couldn't sleep, said it was for kids like us, the ones nobody wants." His fingers twisted the napkin tighter, revealing faint bruises on his knuckles, marks of a life too rough for such small hands. Jack's jaw clenched, memories flooding in. Sarah's laugh, soft as this melody, during the rare good days when she'd volunteer at those anonymous aid spots on the outskirts of town. He'd never gone with her, too buried in club runs, too scarred to see the softness she carried like a hidden blade. The boy tilted his head, curiosity cutting through his fear. "You know it?" Jack nodded once, slow, the scar on his jaw pulling tight. He slid into the booth opposite, the vinyl groaning under his weight, and for the first time in years, the man who broke jaws for a living felt the sting of tears pricking his eyes. Not from weakness. No, from the ghost of a promise he'd half forgotten. Sarah had poured her fading strength into strangers, weaving her song into the fabric of lives he'd never touch. And now, this waif in a biker bar was the thread pulling it all undone. "Yeah, kid," Jack rasped, voice thick as engine oil. "I know it better than my own heartbeat." Outside, the desert night pressed against the windows, stars pinpricks in an endless black. The Iron Promise crew lingered at the tables, brothers who'd ride through hell for Jack, their vests gleaming under the low lights. But this was no turf war or midnight raid. This was a reckoning, quiet as the boy's next breath, hinting at secrets buried deeper than desert graves. Oliver started humming again, tentative, and Jack listened, the saloon fading around them. In that moment, a vow stirred in the big man's chest, not the club's brutal code, but something purer, born of loss and legacy. He'd find out who this lady was, what shadows clung to this child. Because Sarah's song wasn't just melody, it was a call to arms, a promise that honor lived beyond the grave. The door swung open with a gust of hot wind, carrying the scent of sagebrush and distant rain. One of Jack's riders, a burly vet named Reyes, paused in the threshold, eyebrow arched at the scene. "Boss, everything square?" Jack didn't look up, his gaze locked on Oliver's fragile form. "More than square, brother. Get the others. We're riding at dawn." Reyes nodded, vanishing into the night, the engine of his bike growling to life like a beast awakening. The boy watched, wide-eyed, as the weight of unspoken oaths settled over the table. What began as a lone hum in a forgotten bar was unraveling into something vast, a journey through dust-choked roads, hidden truths, and the unbreakable bonds of chosen kin. And Jack Morrison, the unbreakable, felt the first crack in his armor, mended not by force, but by the echo of a woman's enduring light. The first light of dawn clawed its way over the jagged horizon, painting the Nevada Badlands in strokes of bruised purple and gold. The rusty chain saloon stood sentinel behind them, its neon sign flickering out like a dying ember as the convoy assembled in the gravel lot. 57 bikes idled in a loose formation, engines thrumming low and synchronized, a mechanical heartbeat that vibrated through the cooling earth. Jack Morrison straddled his blacked-out Harley, the leather of his gloves creaking as he gripped the handlebars, his breath steady, but his mind a storm. Oliver perched behind him on the padded seat, the boy's slight weight barely registering, bundled in a spare club jacket that draped like a tent over his narrow shoulders. The kid's eyes darted from the growling machines to the endless stretch of highway ahead, a mix of awe and wariness etching lines on his young face. Reyes pulled up alongside, his own bike, a customized Softdale with flames licking the tank, puffing exhaust that smelled of hot metal and faint oil. The rest of the Iron Promise crew fanned out, grizzled riders like Tommy Ghost Hale, whose Vietnam scars hid under long sleeves, and Lena, the only woman in the inner circle, her braid whipping in the breeze as she revved her Sportster. They'd answered Jack's call without question, rolling in from scattered outposts across the state, drawn by the unspoken gravity in his voice over the crackling radio. No turf dispute, no revenge run. Just a gut-deep pull that Jack couldn't shake. Sarah's song had bridged the gap between his armored world and this stray boy's fragility, and now it bound them all in a promise none had voiced yet. Routes clear to the old shelter district, Reyes said, his voice cutting through the rumble. Helmet visor flipped up to reveal eyes sharp as flint. Heard it's shuttered now, but folks say shadows still linger there. Kids coming and going like ghosts. Jack nodded, scanning the lineup. These were his chosen brothers and sisters, forged in the fires of lost battles and midnight oaths. Ghost had pulled him from a ditch after a crash that should have ended him a decade back. Lena had stitched his wounds with a nurse's steady hand after a barroom brawl turned ugly. They'd ride into corruption's heart for him, but this felt different, personal, like peeling back the rust on a vow long buried. Oliver shifted, his small hands clutching Jack's waist, the club's insignia on the jacket's sleeve brushing against weathered denim. "You think she'll be there? The lady who sang?" The boy's whisper was lost in the engines, but Jack felt it like a tremor. He twisted slightly, meeting those wide eyes. "If she's out there, we'll find her. Promises like that don't just vanish." The words hung heavy, echoing Sarah's final breaths, when she'd made him swear to carry her kindness forward, even as the club dragged him toward darker paths. He'd failed then, drowning in grief and runs that numbed the ache. But this child, humming her melody, was redemption's quiet knock. With a signal from Jack, a raised fist, the convoy lurched forward, tires crunching over loose stones as they poured onto the cracked asphalt of Route 95. The desert unfolded like a vast, unforgiving canvas, saguaro skeletons clawing at the sky, heat mirages dancing on the horizon, the air thick with the scent of creosote and sun-baked sand. Wind whipped through the pack, jackets snapping like sails, the roar building to a thunder that drowned out doubts. Oliver leaned into Jack's back, the vibration of the bike lulling him into a tentative doze, his earlier fear easing into the rhythm of motion. For the first time, the boy felt the pull of something solid, not the fleeting shelters or harsh hands of the past, but a makeshift family thundering towards truth. Miles blurred into the morning haze, the sun climbing to bleach the world bone white. They skirted dusty towns where locals paused on porches, squinting at the leather-clad procession, whispers trailing in their wake. Jack's mind raced ahead to the shelter, a ramshackle network on the city's frayed edge, places where the forgotten pieced together survival. Sarah had slipped away there in her last days, her body weakening but spirit unbowed, teaching songs and stories to children society had cast aside. He'd dismissed it as her way of coping, too wrapped in club debts and rival threats to see the depth. Now, Oliver's bruises, faint shadows on pale skin, mirrored those hidden pains, stirring a justice that burned hotter than vengeance. By midday, the urban sprawl encroached, billboards for motels and diners giving way to chain-link fences and boarded windows. The convoy slowed as they entered the outskirts, engines downshifting to a growl that echoed off abandoned warehouses. Reyes led them to a nondescript lot behind what used to be the Horizon Haven Aid Center, its sign weathered to illegibility, weeds choking the chain-link gate. Dust settled as bikes cut off one by one, the sudden silence amplifying the distant hum of traffic and a lone crow's caw. Jack dismounted, helping Oliver down with a gentleness that surprised even him. The boy's sneakers hitting gravel with a soft crunch. The group spread out, scanning the perimeter, peeling paint on cinder-block walls, a rusted swing set creaking in the breeze, echoes of laughter long faded. Ghost kicked at a chain, testing its give, while Lena crouched by a discarded toy truck, her fingers tracing faded colors. "Place looks like it gave up years ago," she murmured, voice laced with the quiet anger of someone who'd seen too many such ruins. Jack approached the main door, its frame splintered, pushing it open to reveal dim interiors thick with dust motes dancing in shafts of light. Empty cots lined the walls, faded murals of smiling suns peeling like old skin. Oliver hesitated at the threshold, then stepped inside, his steps echoing softly. This is it, where she was. He pointed to a corner bunk where faint scratches marked the wood, initials perhaps, or desperate tallies of days. Jack knelt beside him, the floorboards groaning under his bulk, inhaling the stale air of neglect and faint lavender, a ghost of soap that twisted his gut. Sarah's scent. "Tell me more about her, kid. What did she look like? What else did she say?" Oliver's face scrunched in memory, voice gaining strength. "Kind eyes, like yours but softer. Hair in a bun, always humming. Said the song was a promise to keep the dark away, no matter what." As the crew fanned through the rooms, uncovering scattered clues, a worn journal page with lyrics in a familiar script, a locket tangled in debris, tension coiled like a spring. Whispers from the street hinted at closures not by choice, but by shadowed hands. Officials turning blind eyes to needs, favors called in for silence. Jack's fist clenched around the journal fragment, the paper crumbling under his grip. This wasn't just loss, it was a corruption that had silenced Sarah's light, scattering her legacy like desert wind. Reyes appeared at his shoulder, face grim. "Locals talk of a network still running underground, but it's risky. Cops in pockets, doors that lock from the outside." Jack rose, tucking the page into his vest, the weight settling like an oath renewed. Oliver watched him, the boy's hum starting up again, faint against the creaks of the building. The iron promise stood ready, their loyalty a shield against the encroaching dark. What they'd uncovered was no mere shelter's echo. It was a trail leading to buried injustices, where moral lines blurred and true honor demanded a stand. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the lot, Jack felt Sarah's presence in the melody, urging him forward. The ride had just begun, pulling them toward confrontations that would test blood ties and chosen vows alike, where redemption waited not in glory, but in the quiet act of keeping a song alive. The afternoon sun slanted through the shattered windows of the Horizon Haven Aid Center, casting fractured beams that danced with swirling dust, like fireflies trapped in amber. Jack Morrison stood in the dim heart of the building, the journal page clutched in his fist, feeling heavier than any chain he'd ever broken. The paper's edges were frayed, ink faded but unmistakable, Sarah's looping script, the lullaby's verses interspersed with notes on children's dreams, scribbled in haste during her stolen hours away from home. "For the wanderers who forget their way," one line read, underlined twice, as if she'd willed it into permanence. Oliver hovered nearby, his small frame silhouetted against a peeling mural of a winding road leading to a distant sun, his fingers tracing the scratches on the bunk as if they held secrets in their grooves. The Iron Promise crew moved like ghosts through the corridors, their boots scuffing softly on warped linoleum, eyes sharp for anything the decay hadn't claimed. Lena knelt by a overturned filing cabinet, sifting through yellowed folders that smelled of mildew and forgotten hopes. "These dates line up with Sarah's last months," she said, her voice a low murmur that cut through the stillness, holding up a manifest of arrivals, nameless kids from the fringes, some with notes on unexplained absences. Ghost lingered at the back door, his lean form tense as he peered into the overgrown yard where chain link rattled faintly in the breeze. Reyes paced the main room, radio clipped to his belt, crackling with static from a scout he'd sent ahead. The air hung thick with the tang of rust and old rain, a sensory weight that pressed on Jack's chest, stirring memories of Sarah's quiet departures, her excuses about helping where it matters, dismissed by his club-bound cynicism. Oliver broke the silence first, his voice piping up from the corner, tentative but clear. "She'd tell stories too, about a man who rode the wind, keeping promises to the lost." He looked at Jack, eyes wide with the innocence of recollection, the oversized jacket sleeves flopping as he gestured. Jack's throat tightened. That was their story, twisted into fable. Him, the rider, her the anchor. He'd never shared those tales, not even with the crew, yet here they were, woven into this boy's patchwork past. Kneeling to Oliver's level, the floor creaking under his weight, Jack placed a hand on the kid's shoulder, the touch rough but steady, like anchoring a bike in crosswinds. "She must have seen something in you, kid. That song. It's not just notes, it's her way of saying the dark doesn't win." Footsteps echoed from the hall, Reyes returning with a grim set to his jaw, a crumpled flyer in hand, fished from a bulletin board. "Boss, this place didn't close clean." Locals whisper about raids, not official. Guys in unmarked vans, badges flashed but no warrants. Kids vanishing, shelters squeezed dry by regulations that smell like payoffs. He unfolded the paper, revealing a faded notice. Temporary relocation order, community safety initiative. No signatures, just a generic seal that screamed corruption, the kind that festered in backroom deals between officials and shadowy developers eyeing the land for quick flips. Jack's scar pulled tight as he scanned it, rage simmering low like embers in engine exhaust. Sarah had fought this quietly, her songs a shield against the system's grind, but alone her efforts had crumbled like the walls around them. Lena joined them, folder in hand, her braid swinging like a pendulum. One entry mentions a woman matching Sarah's description, volunteer, no last name. Helped a group of runaways before the final shutdown, but after that, trail goes cold. And get this, the absences spike right after. Her eyes met Jack's, a shared understanding passing between them. This wasn't neglect. It was erasure, moral rot disguised as order. Ghost called from the doorway, his voice a gravelly warning. "Company! Sedan pulling up slow, looks official but no lights." The crew tensed, hands drifting to concealed pieces, the air electric with the promise of confrontation. Oliver shrank against Jack, the boy's hum starting up instinctively, a fragile thread against the encroaching threat. Jack rose, positioning himself between the child and the door, his frame blocking the light like a storm cloud. The sedan crunched to a halt outside, doors opening with deliberate slowness. Two men emerged, suits crisp against the grit, one flashing a badge that glinted falsely in the sun, the other scanning the lot with eyes too cold for lawmen. "This site's condemned," the first called, voice oily smooth, stepping over the gate with feigned authority. "Private property, clear out." Reyes stepped forward, arms crossed over his vest, the club's wolf emblem snarling silently. "We're not here for trouble, just answers about the kids who passed through." The suits exchanged glances, the second one smirking. "Answers? This ain't a tour. Move along or we call it trespassing." The words hung like smoke, but Jack felt the undercurrent. These weren't guardians of justice. They were enforcers, pockets lined with the silence they'd bought. Oliver's hum faltered, his small hand finding Jack's belt loop, clinging like a lifeline. In that instant, the big man's resolve hardened, not into the club's familiar fury, but a deeper oath, born of Sarah's legacy. He'd buried her light once, let grief blind him to her work. No more. "We're not moving till we know what happened here," Jack said, his tone even, carrying the weight of roads travelled and promises etched in scars. The lead suit's face hardened, hand twitching toward a radio, but Lena's voice cut in sharp. "You boys ever think about the families waiting? Or is that not in your initiative?" Tension coiled, the desert wind picking up to rattle the fence, carrying the faint scent of impending rain. Ghost flanked Reyes, a silent wall of loyalty, while the crew held formation, their presence a thunder without roar. The suits hesitated, sensing the unyielding front, not bikers spoiling for a fight, but men and women bound by something purer, a chosen kin ready to unearth truths long buried. Oliver whispered up at Jack, "Is this the dark she sang about?" Jack glanced down, his grip firm on the boy's shoulder. "Maybe. But songs like hers, they light the way through." The standoff stretched, seconds ticking like a cooling engine, until the lead suit backed toward the car, muttering into his radio. We'll be in touch. Officially. They peeled out, tires spitting gravel, leaving dust devils in their wake. The crew exhaled collectively, but Jack's gaze lingered on the road. The journal page burning in his pocket. This was no dead end. It was a spark, igniting a trail of shadowed dealings that reached far beyond these walls. Sarah's work had touched lives like Oliver's, only to be stamped out by greed masquerading as law. As the sun dipped, painting the ruins in crimson, Jack turned to his brothers and sister. We dig deeper. Contacts in the city, old favors, quiet rides, no noise, but no backing down. Oliver nodded, his hum resuming softly, weaving through the fading light. The iron promise gathered their finds, a locket with a tiny engraved note, "Keep singing," and mounted up, engines stirring the twilight. What began in a bar's haze was evolving into a quest against institutional shadows, where loyalty tested the soul and redemption demanded sacrifice. Jack felt Sarah's melody in the wind, a call to honor that bound them tighter than blood, pulling them toward revelations that would redefine their unbreakable code. The convoy rolled out, headlights piercing the dusk, toward a network of whispers and hidden doors, where justice waited not in vengeance, but in the courage to voice the silenced songs. The convoy sliced through the encroaching dusk like a blade through silk, headlights carving tunnels in the thickening twilight as they left the Horizon Haven ruins behind. Jack Morrison led the pack, his Harley purring with restrained power, the journal page tucked against his chest like a talisman. Oliver clung to his back, the boy's head nodding against the vibration, his earlier hum silenced by the road's relentless rhythm. The desert air rushed past, cool now with the promise of night, carrying whispers of sage and distant thunder that mirrored the storm brewing in Jack's mind. Behind them, the iron promise stretched in a disciplined line, Reyes on his flank, Lena and Ghost anchoring the rear, their engines a unified growl that drowned out the day's revelations, but not the questions gnawing deeper. They veered off Route 95 onto a forgotten service road, gravel spitting under tires as the urban fringes gave way to scattered trailer parks and flickering street lamps. Jack's destination was a nondescript mechanics shop on the city's underbelly, a neutral ground where old alliances simmered without boiling over. The place belonged to Marco, a wiry ex-club affiliate who'd traded rides for wrenches after a bad run, left him with a limp and a network of eyes in unlikely places. As the bikes pulled into the oil-stained lot, floodlights buzzed to life, casting harsh shadows over rusted hulks of forgotten machines. Marco emerged from the office, wiping grease from his hands on a rag, his face creasing into a wary grin at the sight of Jack dismounting with the kid in tow. "Jack Morrison, bringing the whole thunder to my doorstep? Must be heavy." Marco's voice was smoke-roughened, eyes flicking to Oliver, who peered out from behind Jack's leg, the oversized jacket making him look like a fledgling bird. The crew dismounted in a ripple of leather and buckles, forming a loose circle under the lights, the scent of cooling engines mingling with the sharp tang of solvent. Jack nodded toward the office, a prefab shack cluttered with parts and flickering monitors. "Need your ears on the ground, Marco. That flyer from the shelter, it's the tip of something rotten, suits showing up uninvited. Kids vanishing. Smells like the old game, but with higher stakes." Inside, the air was thick with the hum of fluorescent tubes and the faint crackle of a police scanner Marco kept tuned low. He poured coffee from a dented pot, black as midnight, handing mugs around as the group settled on mismatched stools and crates. Oliver perched on a workbench, swinging his legs, his eyes wide at the array of tools gleaming like silver teeth. Lena sat beside him, her presence a quiet anchor, while Reyes spread the flyer and journal page on a scarred table. Marco leaned in, scanning the documents with a mechanic's precision, his limp shifting as he paced. Heard murmurs about this safety initiative. "It's a front. City council pocketing grants meant for places like Horizon. Developers want the land for condos, but to clear it, they need it empty. No kids, no noise. Those suits? Hired muscle, probably from out east, flashing fake creds to scare off snoopers. Jack's fingers drummed the table, the scar on his jaw catching the light like a fault line. Sarah's words echoed in his head, for the wanderers, a promise she'd etched into those pages, now tainted by greed that had stolen her final acts of grace. He'd ridden for the club through bloodier shadows, enforcing oaths that left scars, but this corruption preyed on the voiceless, twisting justice into a noose. Oliver piped up, voice cutting the tension like a clear note. The lady said there were others like her, people helping in secret. After the doors closed, they didn't stop. Marco's eyes softened, a rare crack in his guarded facade. Kid's right. Underground runs now, safe houses in basements, churches with back rooms. But it's fragile. One wrong word, and the suits come knocking harder. Ghost, silent until now, leaned forward. His Vietnam-honed instincts sharpening his gaze. We need names. Who pulled the strings on the shutdown? Any ties to the club world? Marco hesitated, glancing at Jack, the weight of old loyalties hanging in the steam from the coffee. There's a councilman, Harlan Tate, clean on paper, dirty as sump oil underneath, runs with a crew that fences land deals. Word is, he leaned on the aid networks, offering protection fees or threats. Lost a sister young, they say, but that didn't make him soft, made him meaner. The name landed like a dropped wrench, clanging in Jack's chest. Tate, vaguely familiar from club whispers, a man who'd skirted their territories without crossing lines, buying peace with envelopes of cash. Lena's brow furrowed, her nurse's empathy flaring. If Sarah crossed paths with him, volunteering there, pushing back quietly. She trailed off, the implication heavy. A dying woman's light, drawing the wrong eyes, her efforts perhaps the spark that accelerated the closure. Jack's mind reeled, piecing fragments, Sarah's late nights, her unexplained fatigue beyond the illness, the way she'd hum that lullaby with a fierce determination. Had she stood against this rot alone, her song a subtle defiance? Rage flickered, not the hot blaze of bar fights, but a cold forge, tempering his resolve. Oliver watched him, small hand reaching out to touch the journal. She wouldn't stop. Said promises are like bikes, you fix them when they break. Marco nodded, pulling a battered laptop from under the counter, its screen blooming with grainy feeds from hidden cams around the city. I can point you to a meet. Low-level runner for Tate's outfit, hangs at the Blue Moon Diner tomorrow night. Quiet approach, no colors. Get him talking and threads unravel. The crew absorbed it, a plan forming in nods and murmurs, their chosen bonds tightening like well-oiled chains. Reyes clapped Marco's shoulder, gratitude unspoken but felt. Outside, the night deepened, stars emerging like distant witnesses, the desert wind sighing through the lot. As they filed out, engines stirring once more, Jack lingered, kneeling to Oliver's level in the office's harsh glow. This road's getting rougher, kid. You sure you want to keep riding? The boy met his eyes, no fear now, just a quiet fire. She taught me the song for times like this, to remember we're not alone. Jack ruffled his hair, the gesture awkward but genuine, a crack in the armor widening. Mounting up, the convoy pulled away, tail lights fading into the black like fireflies on the move. The blue moon loomed ahead, a waypoint in the shadows, where ethical lines would blur and loyalties would be tested, not with fists, but with the weight of truths that could redeem or shatter. The ride back to their makeshift base, a cluster of motel rooms off the interstate, unfolded under a canopy of stars, the highway a ribbon of asphalt humming with secrets. Jack's thoughts churned, Sarah's melody weaving through the engine's roar, a reminder that honor wasn't forged in violence alone, but in the steadfast pursuit of light amid the dark. Oliver dozed against him, safe in the thunder, as the iron promise pressed on, bound by a promise reborn from a single hum in a forgotten bar. If this chapter's pulling at your heartstrings, showing the raw power of unspoken vows, hit that like button below. It helps spread these stories of redemption far and wide. The neon glow of the Blue Moon Diner flickered like a hesitant heartbeat against the rain-slicked pavement, its sign buzzing faintly under the overcast sky that had rolled in from the east, heavy with the scent of wet asphalt and distant ozone. It was pushing 9 at night, the kind of hour when the city's underbelly stirred, shadows lengthening in the parking lot, where semis idled like sleeping beasts. Jack Morrison eased his Harley to the curb a block away, killing the engine with a soft sigh, the sudden quiet amplifying the patter of rain on his helmet. Oliver huddled under a plastic poncho Reyes had scrounged from the motel, the boy's eyes reflecting the diner's warm windows, wide with a mix of excitement and the lingering caution of someone who'd learned trust too late. Reyes and Ghost had gone in first, blending into the sparse crowd, truckers nursing coffee, a couple of night shift workers hunched over pie, as unmarked scouts, their vests hidden under flannel shirts. Lena waited in a van across the street, radio clipped to her collar, her voice a steady anchor in Jack's earpiece. Clear so far, targets in the corner booth nursing a soda, looks twitchy. Jack nodded to himself, helping Oliver off the bike, the gravel crunching under their boots as they approached on foot, rain beading on leather like scattered diamonds. The plan was simple, no show of force, just words laced with the weight of truth. Get the runner talking about Tate's operation, trace the threads back to the shelters, to Sarah's silenced work. But simplicity in shadows rarely held. Inside, the diner smelled of frying grease and strong brew, the jukebox crooning a faded country tune that spoke of lost highways and second chances. Jack guided Oliver to a counter stool, ordering 2 milks and a slice of apple pie. The waitress's smile weary but kind as she slid the plates over. From there they had a clear view of the target, a lanky man in his 30s, slicked hair and a cheap suit jacket, fingers drumming the formica as he glanced at his watch every few seconds. Reyes caught Jack's eye from across the room, a subtle nod confirming the man's name. Eddie Voss, low on Tate's ladder, the kind who handled the relocations with a clipboard and a blind eye. Oliver forked a piece of pie, the crust flaking softly, his small voice breaking the diner's hum. He looked scared, like the kids at the shelter when the vans came. Jack's hand paused on his mug, the warmth seeping through ceramic, a faint comfort against the chill settling in his bones. The boy had seen more than most, piecing together fragments from Sarah's stories and his own harsh drifts. Jack leaned in, voice low. "That's why we're here, kid, to make sure no one else has to run." But doubt flickered. This dance with corruption meant skirting lines the club had drawn in blood, trading brute oaths for subtle probes that could unravel everything if they slipped. Reyes slid into the booth opposite Voss. Casual as a regular, his broad frame filling the space without threat, Ghost lingered nearby, pretending to check a map on his phone, his presence a silent pressure. Jack watched from the counter, Oliver's presence grounding him, the boy's quiet munching a rhythm against the tension. "Heard you're the guy who knows about those old aid spots," Reyes started, voice even, sliding a photo of the Horizon Haven flyer across the table. Voss's eyes darted to it, then away, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Wrong booth, pal. I'm just waiting on a ride." But his fingers betrayed him, twitching toward a pack of smokes. The exchange stretched, rain tapping the windows like impatient fingers, the diner's fluorescent hum underscoring every pause. Reyes pressed gently, dropping hints of friends in low places who wanted details on the initiative. Nothing aggressive, just enough to stir curiosity laced with fear. Voss sweated, glancing at the door, but the crew's subtle encirclement held him. "Tate's clean," he muttered finally, voice a rasp over the jukebox's fade. Just business. Land's valuable, shelters eat grants. Relocations keep things tidy. No fuss. No traces. Jack's grip tightened on the mug, the ceramic warm against his calluses as Voss spilled fragments. Vans unmarked, kids shuttled to better facilities that were little more than holding pens, payoffs to officials to look the other way. Sarah's name didn't surface, but the timeline aligned. Her final months, when she'd pushed back with songs and stories, perhaps drawing eyes that hurried the end. Oliver shifted on the stool, his milk half gone, whispering to Jack. "He's lying about the kids. They weren't better off." The words hit like a spark on dry tinder, Jack's scar pulling as he rose, leaving a tip on the counter and guiding the boy toward the booth. Voss's eyes widened at the approach, the big biker's shadow falling over the table like an eclipse. "Those tidy moves," Jack said, voice gravel low, pulling out the journal page and laying it beside the flyer. Sarah's script, a fragile accusation. "They silenced good people. Women pouring light into cracks the likes of you seal shut. Ever think about the promises broken?" Voss paled, the color draining like rain down a windshield, his gaze flicking to the page. Recognition, or just the weight of ghosts he helped bury. "I don't know names, just orders. Tate says jump, we ask how high." But his voice cracked, a thread of conscience unraveling under Jack's steady stare, the air thick with the scent of cooling pie and unspoken regrets. Reyes leaned in. "Give us a thread where the kids end up now. Underground spots, real ones. Tate's weak points." Voss hesitated, rain intensifying outside, thunder rumbling distant like an approaching storm. Then a nod, scribbling an address on a napkin, a warehouse on the industrial strip, whispers of a hidden aid ring still fighting the squeeze. As Voss bolted into the night, umbrella forgotten, the crew gathered, the napkin clutched like a map to buried treasure. Lena's voice crackled over the radio, "Clean exit," but he spooked, could ripple back. Jack pocketed the paper, Oliver's hand slipping into his, small but sure. The boy hummed a bar of the Lullaby, soft against the diner's retreating warmth, a melody that cut through the moral fog. This wasn't victory, just a step deeper into the shadows, where Tate's empire loomed, built on erased lives and stolen legacies. Jack felt Sarah's presence in the notes, urging him onward, not for revenge, but for the quiet justice of restoring what greed had fractured. Outside, the rain sheeted down, turning the lot into a mirror of blurred lights. The iron promise mounted up, engines coughing to life against the downpour, water sluicing off jackets as they formed up. Oliver climbed behind Jack, the poncho crackling, his earlier whisper echoing. Promises like bikes, fixed when they break. The convoy pulled away, tires hissing on wet roads, headlights piercing the veil toward the warehouse. Bonds of chosen kin tightened in the storm. Loyalty a shield against the ethical tempests ahead, where redemption waited in the unraveling of corruption's careful knots. Jack glanced back at the diner fading in the mirrors, the weight of the napkin a vow renewed, pulling them toward confrontations that would test the soul's unyielding honor. The rain had eased to a persistent drizzle by the time the convoy reached the industrial strip, the warehouse district a labyrinth of hulking silhouettes under sodium lamps that cast everything in an orange pallor, like the glow of a dying forge. Jack Morrison navigated the narrow access road, his Harley's tires slicing through shallow puddles that mirrored the fragmented sky, the engine's low rumble a counterpoint to the night's uneasy hush. Oliver pressed close behind him, the poncho's plastic rustling faintly, his small breaths steady against the chill wind that carried the metallic tang of rust and stagnant water from the nearby canal. The iron promise fanned out in pairs, headlights dimmed to slits to avoid drawing eyes, their presence a silent phalanx, bound by the napkin-scribbled address Voss had yielded like a reluctant confession. Reyes pulled alongside as they neared the target, a squat, graffiti-scarred building wedged between derelict loading docks, its roll-up door chained but not padlocked, faint light seeping from cracks like blood from a hidden wound. The air thickened with the scent of damp concrete and faint mildew, the distant clank of a freight train underscoring the isolation. "This is it," Reyes murmured over the comms, his voice a gravel whisper in Jack's earpiece. "No guards visible, but feels off, like they're expecting ghosts." Jack killed his engine, the sudden silence amplifying the drip of water from Eve's and Oliver's soft exhale. He dismounted, lifting the boy down with care, the kid's sneakers splashing lightly as he stuck close, eyes scanning the shadows with a wariness born of too many hidden dangers. Lena and Ghost circled the perimeter on foot, their footsteps muffled on the slick ground, while the rest held position, bikes idling like watchful sentinels. Jack approached the side entrance, a rusted personnel door ajar just enough to suggest recent use, the hinges groaning softly as he nudged it open. Inside, the warehouse yawned into darkness, broken by the warm flicker of lanterns clustered in the far corner, illuminating a makeshift camp, cots draped with threadbare blankets, crates stacked as barriers, and a half-dozen figures huddled around a propane stove, their faces etched with the quiet defiance of survivors. The air hummed with low voices and the sizzle of something cooking, beans maybe, or stew from scavenged cans, mingling with the earthy smell of unwashed clothes and hope clinging to desperation. A woman in her 40s rose from a folding chair, her frame wiry under a faded hoodie, grey streaks threading her dark hair pulled into a practical ponytail. Her eyes, sharp and assessing, locked on Jack's bulk filling the doorway, then softened at the sight of Oliver peeking from behind his leg. "We don't take walk-ins," she said, voice steady but laced with caution, stepping forward with hands visible, no weapon in sight. "Especially not with a crew like yours outside." Jack raised his palms in a gesture of peace, the journal page folded in his vest pocket, feeling like a key to this locked world. "Not here for trouble. Name's Jack. This kid, Oliver, he remembers a woman from the old shelters, sang him a song that meant everything. We're chasing echoes of that." The woman's gaze flicked to Oliver, a flicker of recognition crossing her features like sunlight breaking clouds. She knelt to his level, the lantern light carving gentle shadows on her face. "That song. The one about wanderers and stars." Oliver nodded, his voice a tentative thread. "She said it kept the dark away, taught it to me before the vans." The woman, Elena, she introduced herself, no last name, straightened, a quiet ache in her eyes as she waved them deeper into the space. The others watched warily, a young man with a bandaged arm, two teens sorting canned goods, an elder nursing a mug by the wall. This was the underground pulse Sarah had helped sustain, a fragile network of aid, defying the squeeze, hidden in the city's forgotten veins. They gathered around a scarred workbench doubling as a table, Elena pouring weak tea from a thermos, the steam rising like whispered secrets. Jack spread the flyer and journal fragment, Sarah's script catching the light, verses of the lullaby intertwined with pleas for funding that never came. "She volunteered at Horizon Haven," Jack said, his tone low, the words heavy as he traced the faded ink. "Poured her last strength into places like this, but it got shut down. Suits with fake badges, kids vanishing. We got a name, Harlan Tate. Want to know if her light touched here and why it got snuffed." Elena's fingers tightened on her mug, the ceramic creaking faintly, her face hardening as memories surfaced. "Sarah. Yeah, she came through right before the end. Not often, but when she did, it was like fresh air in a storm. Brought supplies, sang to the little ones, even when she looked like she was carrying the world. Told us about a rider husband. Tough as nails, but with a heart under it all." She paused, glancing at Oliver, who sat rapt, piecing her words with his own fragments. She warned us about Tate early. He was pushing the initiative. Relocations, they called it. But it was clearing out the undesirables for his land grabs, bribed inspectors, threatened volunteers. Sarah stood up to one of his runners once, handed out flyers with that song's words on them. Moral armor, she called it. Didn't stop him, but it lit a fire. The young man with the bandage, Carlos, a former shelter kid now helping run the safe house, leaned in, voice rough from disuse. After Horizon closed, Tate's crew hit the underground harder. Fake raids. Kids funneled to facilities that are just warehouses for cheap labor or worse. Signs of rough handling, but no traces left. Sarah's song. It spread. We hum it here when things get tight. A reminder that promises outlast the suits. Jack's chest tightened, the melody echoing in his mind. Sarah's legacy not buried but alive in these resilient souls, a quiet rebellion against the corruption that had hastened her fade. Oliver reached for the journal, his small finger following the lines. She promised we'd find family. Like this? Elena's nod was solemn, but her eyes shadowed with urgency. Tate's tightening the noose. Word is he's planning a big sweep, clear the strip for development, bury the networks for good. Got insiders in the department, turning aid into crime. If you're riding for her, we could use eyes on his next meet. Tomorrow, Old Mill on the river, his lieutenants hashing details. Reyes, stationed at the door, radioed a quiet affirmative. The crew outside shifting like guardians in the rain. Ghost appeared in the threshold, dripping, his face grim. Perimeters holding, but lights in the distance. We move soon. Jack rose, the weight of alliances forming like links in a chain. Sarah's light binding strangers into chosen kin. He clasped Elena's hand, rough calluses meeting hers, a vow unspoken but sealed. We'll ride with that, for the song, for the wanderers. Oliver stood, humming a bar as they filed out, the melody weaving through the warehouse like a thread pulling the dark apart. Outside, engines stirred low, the convoy coalescing under the drizzle, headlights blooming as they pulled away. The mill loomed ahead, a confrontation brewing where moral lines would fracture and honor demand sacrifice, not in thunderous clashes, but in the steadfast unraveling of shadows that had dimmed too many lights. As the miles unspooled toward dawn, Jack felt the pull of redemption sharpening, Oliver's hum a beacon in the rear view, urging them toward Tate's web. The iron promise thrummed with purpose, loyalty a forge against the storm, where promises reborn would clash with corruption's cold grip, testing the unbreakable in the quiet fire of justice. The first grey light of pre-dawn seeped through the river mist, turning the old mill into a spectral outline against the sluggish flow of the water, its rusted silos leaning like weary sentinels under the weight of forgotten industry. Jack Morrison guided the Iron Promise convoy along the overgrown access path, engines throttled to a whisper that blended with the lap of waves against concrete pilings and the distant cry of a heron breaking the hush. The air hung heavy with the briny tang of the river and damp earth, rain from the night before, leaving the ground soft and treacherous under tires. Oliver rode pillion behind Jack, his small form bundled against the chill, the poncho crinkling faintly as he leaned forward, eyes fixed on the looming structure where Tate's lieutenants were set to converge, a shadowed council that could unravel the web, strangling the underground networks. Reyes flanked Jack on his Softail, the crew dispersed in pairs through the tree line, Lena and Ghost on point, their silhouettes merging with the fog like ghosts of old wars. The mill's yard was a graveyard of machinery, twisted metal beams and shattered pallets, slick with dew. Perfect cover for the quiet approach Elena had mapped. No raid, no thunder. This was a reckoning forged in subtlety, voices piercing the corruption where fists might only echo, Jack's hand rested on the handlebar, the leather grip worn smooth from years of oaths kept and broken. Sarah's journal page a faint outline in his vest. Her song hummed in his veins, a steady pulse against the moral storm ahead, binding this chosen family in a promise that outlasted the scars. They dismounted in the shadows of a derelict conveyor, boots sinking into mud that sucked at their soles, the scent of rust and wet timber thick as they crept forward. Oliver stuck close to Jack, his breath shallow but unafraid, the boy's earlier hum silenced by the gravity of the moment. From a vantage of stacked crates, they watched the first arrivals. 3 sedans gliding in like sharks, doors opening to disgorge men in ill-fitting suits, clipboards and low murmurs their weapons. Tate wasn't there, too high for the dirt work, but his echoes were. Voss's boss. A paunchy enforcer named Hale, barking orders as they unloaded boxes that clinked with the telltale rattle of cash or contraband. Lena's voice crackled softly in Jack's earpiece. They're sealing deals, land deeds, initiative stamps, mentions sweeps at dawn, hitting the warehouses. The crew held formation, a wall of quiet resolve, hearts pounding like idling engines. Jack's scar itched in the damp, memories of Sarah's final whispers surfacing, her vow to shield the lost, now twisted into this machine of erasure. Oliver tugged his sleeve, whispering, "They're the dark, but we have the song." Jack nodded, the words a spark, and signaled Reyes. They moved as one, emerging from the mist not with aggression, but presence. Leather vests catching the faint light. A phalanx of weathered faces etched with unyielding honor. Hale spun at the crunch of gravel, his hand freezing mid-gesture, eyes widening at the unexpected tide. "We're not here to spill blood," Jack called, voice carrying clear over the river's murmur, stepping into the open with Oliver at his side, the boy a living emblem of the stakes. The lieutenants tensed, hands twitching toward hidden pieces, but the crew's steady advance, Ghost's Vietnam poise, Lena's unflinching gaze, held them. "We're here for the truth. Harlan Tate's game ends tonight. The shelters, the kids vanished into your facilities. It's over. Sarah Morrison's work won't stay buried." Hale's face paled at the name, a flicker of recognition betraying the threads. Sarah's quiet pushback, her flyers with the Lullaby's words, a thorn that had pricked Tate's plans just enough to hasten Horizon's fall. The enforcer blustered, voice oily with false authority. "Private meet. You bikers got no jurisdiction. Clear out before we make it official." But Reyes flanked him, unfolding the napkin address and journal page, Elena's relayed details spilling like evidence from a cracked safe. Official, like the fake badges at the ruins or the payoffs drying up aid for land flips. The lieutenants shifted, unease rippling as Ghost loomed silent, a shadow promising consequences beyond the law's reach. Oliver stepped forward, small but unbowed, his voice piping clear. "The lady sang about promises. You broke them, kids like me. We remember." The words landed like notes in still air, Hale's bravado cracking, his eyes darting to the boxes as if weighing the cost of silence against the unraveling truth. Tension coiled, the river's flow the only sound, until Hale's shoulders slumped, the fight leaching out like mist in the rising sun. Tate's the head. He leaned on us, threats if we didn't move the kids, grease if we did, facilities, holding spots till adoption mills or worse. Sarah. She got too close, stirring folks with that damn tune. Tate shut her places to warn others. Confessions tumbled, recorded on Lena's hidden device, threads pulling loose, dates aligning with Sarah's final months, her defiance a catalyst for the crackdown that stole her remaining light. No violence erupted. The crew's loyalty. Their chosen bond was the blade, moral weight exposing the rot without a drop spilled. As dawn broke fully, painting the mill in gold, the lieutenant scattered, Hale tossing a burner phone with Tate's direct line before fleeing into the sedan's exhaust. Jack pocketed it, the weight a final key, dialing Elena from the yard as the crew regrouped. Thread secured. Tate's next. We ride clean. Hand it to the light. Her voice crackled back, gratitude thick. Sarah's song lives. The networks hold because of this. Oliver hummed softly, the melody weaving through the morning air, drawing smiles from the weary faces around him. Reyes clapping Jack's back, Lena ruffling the boy's hair, Ghost nodding in rare approval. The convoy fired up, engines roaring to life as the sun crested, chasing shadows from the river. Jack lifted Oliver aboard, the boy's grip sure now, a family forged in the quiet fire of redemption. Tate would face exposure, not through vengeance, but the unyielding honor of promises kept, Sarah's legacy blooming in safe houses revived, kids like Oliver finding anchors in chosen kin. The road stretched open, dust rising in their wake, a testament to justice poetic and profound. The toughest man, once broken by loss, mended by a child's hum, leading his brothers toward a horizon where light outlasted the dark. The mill faded in the mirrors, the iron promise thundering toward the city, where truths would cascade like dawn's first rays, binding wounds and honoring the silenced. Jack felt Sarah in the wind, her lullaby eternal, a vow that family chosen endured. Redemption not in glory, but in the courage to sing through the storm. Thank you for riding with us through this tale of unbreakable promises and quiet courage. If these stories of redemption touch your soul, hit that subscribe button and join the Iron Promise family. More chapters of honor and heart await on the horizon.